Snow crunches under boots. Neon flickers red. Breath fogs in freezing air. Bella runs, clutching a silver charm. Heart racing. Footsteps echo behind her. Slow, deliberate, unrelenting. She can't even speak. The charm swings wildly. Her palm scrapes against icy brick. A shadow looms at the alley's end. Her father's voice, sharp in memory. "Never go to Russia, Bella. Never." The words twist in her chest like ice. Another memory. The locked drawer, the key she wasn't supposed to see. Door slams somewhere nearby. Bella flinches. The shadow steps closer. A low, almost gentle voice cuts the silence. "Bella, stop running. Why was he here? Who was he really?" She's alone in Moscow. No phone. No passport. A photograph sits on the counter. Her father. Beside a man who looks like him, but isn't. Fear claws her throat. Every heartbeat screams, "This isn't a mistake. This is a trap." She never understood her father's fear. Not until now. Every choice she's made has led to this shadowed alley, this impossible moment. And the truth behind the charm, the photograph, and the man watching her will change everything she thought she knew about family, love, and survival. What happens next will leave you breathless. If you're ready to discover the secret that could destroy, or save, her life, hit subscribe now, and let us know where you are watching from. You won't want to miss a second, because every second she hesitated could cost her everything. What would you do if your entire life had been a lie? Bella's face, terrified, determined. She doesn't know who to trust, or how to survive. Now the story begins. The zipper caught for the third time that morning. Bella tugged it free, smoothing the stiff fabric of the pastel blazer her father insisted she wear on weekdays. As she stood before the mirror in her childhood bedroom, still curated like a showroom, she felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Every color, every book spine, every framed achievement had been chosen for her long before she ever decided who she wanted to be. California sunlight streamed through the blinds in obedient lines, falling across rows of ballet trophies she hadn't touched in years. Her father believed routine built excellence, so he gave her a life made of schedules. Curated outfits hung by day and hour. Piano practice at 6. Fencing lessons at 8. Tutors. Specialists. Evaluations. Polite smiles on command. Most daughters grew up with rules. Bella grew up with commandments. Rule 1. Never ask about Russia. The moment she formed the question, around age 9, her father shut the door in her face and didn't speak to her for 2 days. Rule 2. Never touch the locked drawer. It remained in his study, ancient and dented, a relic from a past she wasn't allowed to know existed. Rule 3. Never step out of line. That was the one unspoken, but it guided her entire upbringing like a ghost. Bella wasn't abused. She was polished, corrected, perfected, beautiful, but caged. She once wondered if love was supposed to feel like a leash made of silk. Her father's presence always arrived before he did, through the sound of his shoes in the hall or the faint scent of sandalwood that clung to every rule he'd ever enforced. Even now, at 31, she still felt him standing behind her, adjusting her posture in the mirror. And maybe that was why the zipper catching bothered her so much that morning. It wasn't stuck. She was. The warning came in the form of a soft knock on her door. Bella! Her father's assistant, Claire, peeked in. "He's already left for the airport." Bella blinked. He didn't say goodbye. He had a last-minute business call. Japan can't wait. Of course it couldn't. Tokyo, investments, silent deals. Those were the only things that ever outranked control. As the front door shut behind Claire a few minutes later, Bella stood in the living room of the house she'd lived in her whole life and realized something painfully simple. For the first time since she was 16, her father was out of the country and she was completely unsupervised. She walked through the house in a haze, every room echoing with decisions she never made. She'd become an adult by age, not by choice. Her life was a series of safe paths, smooth surfaces, and carefully calculated futures. 31. 31, and she had never made a dangerous mistake. Never kissed someone she shouldn't. Never argued with a man who scared her. Never booked a ticket without asking permission. Her gaze fell upon something lying on the coffee table, something she always handled delicately. A silver charm. A tiny moon engraved with delicate swirls, the only thing she inherited from her mother before she died. Her father let her keep it, but it was the one item he never touched, as if her mother's memory burned him. Bella picked it up, and for once she didn't return it to its velvet box. She clasped it around her neck, the metal cool against her skin. Something in her tightened, and then snapped. By the time she realized what she was doing, she was already at her laptop, fingers shaking over the keyboard. Her search history had never been rebellious before. Flights to Moscow. She didn't pause, didn't analyze, didn't plan. She booked the flight. She stood, heart hammering hard enough to drown out her logic. And for the first time in her entire life, she made a choice that was entirely, recklessly, breathtakingly her own. It wasn't until she was stuffing clothes into a duffel bag, clothes her father would absolutely forbid, that the memory surfaced. 16-year-old Bella, hiding from another ballroom etiquette class, had slipped into a fair on the beach. Her friends scattered among the neon lights, but she found herself drawn toward a booth draped in indigo cloth. A fortune teller sat inside, eyes shadowed, fingers covered in rings. "You," she had whispered, not asking for Bella's hand but taking it anyway. "You will love a man who takes your breath away." Bella remembered laughing. She didn't believe in fate, prophecy, or destiny. She believed in rules. She believed in her father. But the fortune teller didn't smile. "And you will fear him," she added. Bella blinked at the memory now, shaking her head as she zipped the duffel bag closed. She was 31, too old to let a teenage superstition bother her. She was going to Moscow because she needed air, because she wanted to know who she was without someone scripting her life, because something inside her had been waiting, years, maybe decades, for a single act of defiance. The prophecy was just a story, just a flicker of drama from a forgotten afternoon. She had no idea that every step she took toward that boarding gate would lead her straight into the prophecy's darkest edge, the part the fortune teller never said aloud, the part about the man who would not only take her breath away, but might not let her go. Bella noticed him before he spoke. The moment she slid into her seat, the faint scent of expensive cologne drifted toward her, subtle, woodsy, the kind worn by men who didn't need to announce their wealth. He sat by the window, broad shoulders relaxed, book open but unattended. Tattoos curled along his knuckles like shadows, black ink disappearing beneath the cuff of a tailored jacket. He glanced up. His eyes were a deep, arresting blue, calm in a way that didn't match his intimidating build. "You picked a good day to fly," he said, voice low, warm, touched by a Russian accent. "Clear skies." Bella smiled politely. "I'll take your word for it." He studied her, not intrusively, but observantly, as if he could sense the tremor under her calm exterior. First time to Moscow? She hesitated. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who knows what it looks like to run from something. The words hit too close. She turned toward him fully, surprised by how easily honesty tugged at her. I'm going to see it for myself. Architecture, he guessed. She blinked. How did you? It's your eyes. You look at the world as if you're searching for structures meant to hold you. His gaze softened. Or free you. Their conversation flowed without the stiffness of strangers. They talked about Moscow's rooftops, Gothic arches, the rhythm of buildings shaped by history and pain. From architecture, they fell into confessions of freedom, what it felt like, what it cost. Bella found herself admitting small truths, how she felt watched, directed, controlled. He didn't judge her. He listened. When she asked about his family, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Expectations, he said. Legacy. A name that feels less like inheritance, more like a chain. He exhaled. Some things are heavy to carry. Hidden pains flickered through his voice. Loss, betrayal, something unresolved. Yet despite the shadows, he seemed warm. Grounded. Present in a way no one else ever had been. By the time the plane landed, Bella felt as if she had shared 8 hours of her life with someone who already lived inside a small corner of her chest. But Dmitri stood before she could speak again, offering her a hand to help her up. "Welcome to Moscow, Bella," he murmured. "I hope the city shows you what you came to find." His fingers lingered a second too long. Something electric passed between them, dangerous, undeniable, and she felt herself leaning toward it. Motion swept them forward as soon as they stepped into the cold Moscow evening. Dmitri moved with quiet confidence, guiding her through streets lined with amber lights and crisp winter air. The city felt alive, messy, raw, real, so different from the polished Californian order she'd always known. Rooftops glittered with frost, domes rising like painted flames. Dmitri showed her narrow alleys leading to underground restaurants hidden beneath brick arches. Candlelight flickered over tables, casting shadows that danced along the stone walls. Bella inhaled the scent of roasted garlic, fresh bread, simmering broth. "I've never tasted food like this," she said, laughing softly when he insisted she try a spoonful of his stew. "It's better shared," he replied, eyes locked on hers. There were small touches, barely there, electric. His fingertips brushing her wrist when passing her a dish. His shoulder grazing hers as they walked down the steps. The warm rumble of his laugh when she mispronounced a Russian toast. She felt her pulse rise each time, a flutter of warmth she couldn't contain. But there were shadows, too. While walking past Red Square, a military parade rehearsed in the distance. The rhythmic march echoed through the streets, drums beating like a warning. Dmitri froze. His expression went still, too still. The warmth drained from his eyes, replaced by something sharp, haunted. His jaw clenched so tightly she could see the muscle twitch. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. He blinked, the moment snapping like brittle glass. "Yes. Just an old memory." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. The air around him carried a weight she could feel but not name. And she sensed, for the first time, that he was not merely a man who charmed rooms. He was someone forged by conflict, internal or otherwise. Someone dangerous in ways she didn't yet understand. Snow began to fall by the time they reached the river. Bella leaned against the railing, breath misting into the cold air. "I grew up with rules," she said quietly. "Ones I never chose. I don't think I've ever made a real decision until yesterday. Dmitri leaned beside her, the city lights painting soft gold across his face. And how does it feel? Terrifying, she whispered. But also freeing. He nodded slowly. Freedom is always a risk. The cost is never small. He paused, fingers ghosting near hers on the railing but not touching. But sometimes it's worth everything. She sensed then that he was speaking to himself as much as to her. What happened to you? She asked gently. A shadow crossed his face. There was someone I trusted, he said. Family. Blood. His voice tightened, low and strained. They made a choice that destroyed everything. He didn't say more. Bella didn't push. Their silence felt intimate, not empty. It was a place where unspoken truths breathed. And without meaning to, she reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. He turned his palm up, fingers closing over hers with a warmth that went straight to her chest. Electricity passed between them, real and unforced, a connection that felt both fragile and faded. But beneath it, she sensed something else. A tension. A secret. Something he was holding back with careful precision. The kind of truth that could rewrite everything. Bella woke to silence. A soft, sterile silence that didn't belong to the bustling Moscow she'd fallen asleep admiring. She blinked into the dim early light and sat upright, confusion slicing through her haze. This wasn't the cozy boutique hotel Dmitri had walked her into. This was a penthouse. A vast, modern space of glass and steel. Too large. Too empty. Too controlled. Her pulse quickened. She slipped out of the bed, feet touching cold marble. Something was wrong. She searched the nightstand first. No phone. No passport. No bag. Panic prickled along her spine. She hurried toward the door, grabbing the handle. It didn't move. Locked. Bella's breath trembled in her chest as she backed away. A sliver of morning light caught something on the kitchen counter. A photograph. She approached slowly, dread curling low in her stomach. It was a picture of her father, standing beside a man who looked terrifyingly, undeniably like Dmitri. Same eyes, same build, younger but unmistakable. Her father's arm rested casually on his shoulder. Her vision blurred. The room tilted. And in that dizzying moment of betrayal, one truth slammed into her. She had never been running toward Moscow. She had been walking straight into her father's past. And Dmitri knew far more about her than he ever let on. The sound of the lock turning felt louder than it should. Bella's spine stiffened as the penthouse door swung open. Dmitri stepped inside, but the warmth she remembered, the softness in his gaze, the careful attentiveness, was gone. His expression was stone. "You're awake," he said, voice flat, void of emotion. "Dmitri, what is this?" Bella's voice shook. "Why am I locked in here?" He didn't answer. He simply looked at her, slow, assessing, like someone studying evidence rather than a person. Then he spoke her name with a precision that sliced. Bella Volkov. Her breath broke in her chest. "What did you call me?" His jaw tightened. "Your real name." "No," she whispered. "No, that's not. You think I don't verify who I bring into my father's city?" His voice sharpened, a dangerous edge slipping through. "You think I didn't run your name the moment you stepped onto that plane?" She shook her head, backing away. "My father's name is Rodriguez. Victor Rodriguez." "Yes." Dmitri's eyes hardened. "Because Victor Volkov needed an American mask." Her blood ran cold. He stepped closer, not threatening, but resolute. A man delivering a sentence. Your father, he said, stole $2 million from Alexei Volkov. My father. The world tilted beneath her. Bella gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white. That's impossible. My father isn't. He wouldn't. My father died, Dmitri continued, believing he was betrayed. Believing the man he trusted, your father, devastated our family and disappeared. Bella's throat closed. She could barely breathe. No. My father doesn't even. He never talked about Russia. He never. Yes, Dmitri said, voice dropping, darkening. Because he's been running from it for 30 years. He took another step. She felt the gravity of him. Grief, rage, duty, pain tangled into something sharp. You didn't stumble into this, Bella. You walked straight into the truth he hid from you. Tears blurred her vision. The silver charm at her neck felt suddenly heavy. Too heavy. Why didn't you tell me on the plane? She whispered. Because, Dmitri said quietly, I hadn't yet decided what you were. Bella's denial cracked like glass beneath pressure. You're lying, she said, voice trembling with anger. This is insane. My father is strict, not a criminal. Dmitri moved to the table and dropped a thin folder in front of her. Look. No, she whispered. Look. His command hit with the weight of an order, not a request. She forced her shaking fingers to open the folder. Flight logs. Transaction records. Old documents sealed with faded Russian stamps. Newspaper clippings. A photo of a younger Victor, her father, standing beside a man with Dmitri's eyes. And at the top of one page, Viktor Volkov. Signature. Her father's handwriting. Clean. Unmistakable. Bella covered her mouth, a cry trapped behind her palm. This is forged, she said desperately. It has to be. Dmitri watched her break with unreadable eyes. Cold, but not indifferent. If it were forged, Bella, I would know. I lived this truth. She lifted her gaze, trembling with rage. So what now? You lock me up. Punish me for something I didn't do. His jaw clenched. I haven't decided yet whether you live. The air left her lungs. He said it softly, without cruelty, without drama, as if it were simply a fact. An unavoidable one. A single tear slid down Bella's cheek. And Dmitri looked away. As if he couldn't watch her break and still keep the promise he'd made to a ghost. Time moved strangely after that. Bella was guarded, emotionally, physically, every movement watched. Yet she was not mistreated. The penthouse was comfortable, the food warm, the space safe. She hated it. Dmitri visited at unpredictable hours, always composed, always distant. Yet cracks showed in him, small, human fissures he couldn't hide. He brought her books without explanation. He left tea on the counter when he thought she was asleep. When a guard stared too long at her thighs, Dmitri snapped, shoving the man against the wall, voice low, dangerous. She is not yours to look at, he snarled. Bella saw it, in the flicker of guilt across his face afterward, that even he wasn't sure why he said it. At night, she heard him pacing behind the hallway wall. Slow, heavy footsteps that never settled. Sometimes he stopped, breath shaky as if he were wrestling something silent and overwhelming. Grief, maybe. Or duty. Or the terrible collision of the two. Bella found herself watching him, not with fear, but with a painful, unwanted understanding. He wasn't a monster. He was a man drowning in a legacy of betrayal. And she was the storm he didn't know how to survive. High cinematic tension. It was close to midnight when it happened. Bella sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, trying to quiet her thoughts. The door opened, too roughly. A guard stumbled in, smelling of vodka, eyes unfocused. "You're the princess," he slurred. "The one he hides." Bella stood instantly. "Leave." But he only smirked. "He locked you up. Means you're nobody. Means you're here for us." He grabbed her arm. Bella shoved him away, panic exploding through her. "Don't touch me." He lunged. A roar cut through the penthouse. "Dimitri!" He slammed into the guard with a force that shook the room. They crashed into the marble floor, Dimitri's fists flying. Raw, violent, terrifying. Nothing controlled, nothing strategic. Pure instinct. Pure fury. "Don't you ever touch her," Dimitri growled, voice guttural, unrecognizable. Blood smeared across the guard's face. The man went limp. Dimitri rose, chest heaving, eyes wild. Bella backed away, but not from fear of him. From the war she could finally see tearing him apart. Something fractured in his expression as he looked at her. Anger, guilt, protectiveness, pain tangled into a single breath. "I won't let anyone hurt you," he said, voice shaking. "But I don't know," he whispered, "if that includes me." And Bella understood then. Dimitri wasn't her captor. Dimitri was a man fighting a battle between vengeance and something dangerously close to love. And he was losing. The penthouse was quiet. The city outside glittered with cold, indifferent light, unaware of the storm brewing within. Bella stood in the middle of the living room, hands gripping the silver charm at her neck. Her breath was steady now, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She met Dimitri's gaze, unwavering. "Tell me," she said, voice firm though layered with fear, "who your father really was." Dimitri froze, expression unreadable. The weight of her demand filled the room like smoke. For the first time, he didn't speak in measured tones. His defenses, carefully constructed over years of grief and anger, began to crumble. "My father," he whispered, voice raw, breaking, "was a man who built an empire with his hands and kept it clean of his enemy's blood. But that didn't mean life was fair." His fingers trembled slightly, brushing over the edge of the table. Alexei Volkov, he trusted. He believed in loyalty. And when he died, the world tried to claim the truth away. People twisted it, used it, left the blame to fester. Dimitri's eyes glistened. "Your father, Victor, he was a friend. He saved my family once, a lifetime ago, when enemies would have torn us apart. But the money, the theft, the lies, it poisoned everything after." He pressed a hand to his face, finally allowing himself to break. "I lost him, and I believed your father had stolen him from me." Bella listened, the threads of anger, fear, and understanding twisting inside her. She saw a man stripped bare by grief. Vulnerable, human, dangerous. And yet, a part of her wanted to reach out, to steady him, to tell him that the world wasn't only betrayal. She stepped closer, careful of the invisible walls between them. Her voice was soft but unwavering. "I hear your pain, Dimitri. I understand loss. I understand anger. But killing me makes you the villain of someone else's story. Your father didn't raise you to be this." He turned sharply, jaw tight, eyes flicking to hers. "Do you think I haven't imagined this moment? Every scenario, every choice? that the only way to honor him is by exacting revenge. "You're honoring nothing," she said, voice stronger now. "You're letting his death decide your soul. You're choosing a path that will destroy you, and me. And for what? A lie that's been fed to you your whole life." Dimitri's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The raw emotion in her words broke through the icy wall around him. He inhaled sharply, chest rising, then falling. Slowly, painfully, he allowed her words to sink in. The fight in his eyes wavered, replaced by something softer, something that hinted at hope buried beneath years of wrath. For the first time, Bella saw him as a man caught between two worlds, loyalty to a memory and the chance to choose a different future. Dimitri stepped back, running a hand through his hair. He didn't release her, didn't give up control. But the tension shifted, subtly, palpably. "You're not free," he said, voice quieter now, almost admitting defeat. "But I won't treat you as a hostage either." Bella's chest rose with cautious relief. She didn't trust the moment, but she could feel the change. The walls weren't gone, they were simply softened. "I will confront your father," Dimitri continued. "Face to face. No more shadows. No more lies. You won't be used as a pawn in this story." Bella nodded, every nerve alert. Her courage had forced him to pause, to reconsider, to see another path forward. The city lights outside the window reflected off his eyes, haunted, yet slowly regaining clarity. "And then," she whispered almost to herself, "we'll see if this ends in justice, or more pain." Dimitri said nothing, but she could see the weight of the promise settling on his shoulders. They had stepped into the storm, together and yet apart. One choice had altered the trajectory of both their lives irreversibly. There was no turning back. The camera, or imagination, lingers on the two figures. Bella standing tall, silver charm clutched in her hand, and Dimitri, powerful and scarred, shadowed by grief but softened by her courage. And somewhere deep inside both of them, the truth simmers. The collision with her father is inevitable, and when it comes, nothing will be the same. The airport limo pulled up to the penthouse entrance, the tires crunching against snow that had turned gray under the city lights. Bella sat rigid in the back seat, hands clutching the silver charm at her neck, heart thundering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed, fear, caution, memory, but she forced herself to breathe. Inside the penthouse, Dimitri waited. The faint hum of the heater, the soft ticking of a clock somewhere in the corner, and the distant city sirens were the only sounds. He hadn't moved when she arrived, arms crossed, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked like a man hollowed out by weeks of rage and uncertainty, and yet every line of him screamed control. Bella's lips pressed into a thin line. She was terrified, of the conversation to come, of what truths might unravel, of the man she'd come to understand and the father she'd left behind thousands of miles away. And yet, beneath the fear, she felt a strange resolve. She had chosen to face this, and she would see it through. The door clicked again. Heavy steps approached, and Bella's pulse spiked. Victor Rodriguez entered, her father. His face, older than memory, was drawn tight with fatigue, grief, and an unspoken burden. His eyes met Dimitri's, and the air in the room thickened with history, lies, and years of silence. The confrontation began before words could fully form. Dimitri's jaw tightened. Victor's hands trembled, though he tried to mask it with the rigidity of authority. "You took it," Dimitri said, voice low, edged with accusation. "I did," Victor admitted immediately, almost defensively, "but not to betray him." "Not to betray." Dimitri's hands curled into fists, eyes flashing with decades of grief. Do you know what your absence, your secrecy, what your choices cost me? Bella felt herself shrinking into the space between them, watching fury and sorrow collide. The room seemed to pulse with tension, every breath weighted, every glance loaded. "Your father," she began, uncertain if speaking would help or hurt. Her voice was small, trembling. Dimitri's eyes flicked toward her, a flicker of warning, but she pressed on. "You've both been trapped by a story that isn't yours," she said softly, though the words carried all the conviction she could muster. "And the pain you're passing down, don't let it take me too." Dimitri's gaze wavered, a crack in the armor of rage. Victor's eyes softened, a mixture of shame and relief washing over his features. Silence fell, heavy and shattering, a pause pregnant with years of misunderstanding. Outside, the city continued in oblivious rhythm, but inside, history itself seemed to hold its breath. The tension in the room thickened like smoke. Dimitri's fists were clenched at his sides, knuckles white, every muscle coiled with years of imagined betrayal. Victor's face, pale and lined with the weight of confession, finally cracked. "I need you to understand," Victor said, voice low but steady. "Everything you believe, every decision, every night of rage and mistrust, it was built on a lie." Dimitri's eyes narrowed, searching his father's friend. No, his father's enemy turned savior, for some kind of trap. Bella's hand gripped his arm lightly, the only tether to sanity in the maelstrom. Victor drew a deep breath. "Yes, I took the money, but not to betray Alexei, not to destroy him. I took it to protect him, from men who would have killed him and destroyed our families. They forged the note. Alexei's death, the so-called suicide, it was arranged. They wanted to make sure no one survived the Volkovs and the Rodriguez line. They wanted everything to burn." The words fell like stones in Dimitri's chest. He staggered backward, shoulders slumping, as if the weight of decades had suddenly been dropped on him. His eyes, sharp and calculating for years, filled with disbelief and a hurt so raw it was almost physical. "No," he whispered. "No, that can't be." "Yes," Victor said, voice firm, eyes glistening. "Everything you thought you knew was twisted. The anger, the vengeance, the planning, it was all for nothing. They wanted you to be trapped by grief. They wanted your life to be consumed by the fire of lies." Dimitri pressed his palms to his face, shuddering. The rigidity that had defined him, his control, his rage, his careful planning, cracked. He sank to his knees, silent gasps rattling from his chest. Bella moved instinctively, kneeling beside him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, firm, grounding. "Dima," she said softly, using the nickname he hadn't heard in days, maybe weeks. "Look at me. You're not your father's mistakes. You're not your father's pain. This isn't your war anymore." He shook his head, still trembling, grief rolling through him in waves. "All these years, I blamed him, blamed her, blamed everyone who didn't deserve it. I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're still you," Bella whispered, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. "And you can choose who that person becomes. Not vengeance, not anger. You. Not them. Not the past. You." Dimitri's hands gripped her arm like a lifeline, not in aggression, but in desperation. He let himself lean into her, the human connection breaking through the rigid armor of suspicion and rage. Tears streamed unchecked down his cheeks, mixing with a faint scent of cold Moscow air seeping through the open window. Victor watched quietly, a quiet relief mingled with his own grief. He could see the boy he'd lost years ago, the man hardened by lies, now unraveling and starting to understand the truth. "Your anger," Victor said carefully, "was never against me. It was against the story they forced upon you. And now you have a choice. You can let it define you, or you can step out of it." Dmitri nodded, voice barely above a whisper. I need to breathe. I need to let it go." Bella held his gaze, squeezing his shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The distant hum of the city, muffled by thick glass, reminded them that life continued beyond this apartment, beyond revenge, beyond lies. The physical weight of grief was still there, but something else had arrived in its place. Clarity. A fragile, trembling clarity that offered the possibility of renewal. Dmitri finally rose, slowly, as though reclaiming himself from the shadows of his past. Bella stayed beside him, steady, her presence anchoring the fragile rebirth. Victor gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that the truth had been heard, and that the poison of misunderstanding had finally been replaced with something real. Outside, the city lights sparkled indifferently, unaware of the emotional upheaval that had just transpired in the penthouse. Inside, a man who had lived years under a lie had begun to exhale for the first time. And beside him, a woman who had faced danger, fear, and love had become the bridge between grief and understanding. Bella's hand still rested lightly on Dimitri's arm. "We can't change what happened," she said, "but we can decide what comes next." Dimitri's gaze softened, the edge of rage replaced by something quieter. Hope, perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. He inhaled deeply, as if drawing life into lungs that had long been constricted by anger. "Yes," he murmured, almost to himself. "We decide." And in that moment, the room seemed lighter. Not free of grief, not free of the past, but free enough to start stepping forward. Together. The penthouse was still. Silence lingered after the storm of revelations, heavy but different now, lighter, tempered by clarity. Dmitri stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, hands in pockets, eyes distant, tracing the snow-covered streets below. Victor remained near the doorway, shoulders tight, wary. The past had been faced, but it hadn't dissolved the scars. Bella stepped forward, careful yet confident. She met Dimitri's gaze, and for the first time in weeks, he returned it without suspicion, without the calculation of a man always expecting betrayal. He exhaled slowly. "You're free to go," he said, voice soft, almost reluctant. "Not just from the penthouse, from all of this." He gestured toward the space between them, toward the invisible chains that had bound her in fear, suspicion, and danger. Bella's lips curved slightly in relief. "Thank you," she said. Not a perfunctory gratitude, but a recognition of the choice he had made, for both of them. Dmitri shook his head, a faint, bitter smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I don't think I can ever forgive my father, or mine, for that matter. But the story can end here. Not with revenge. Not with rage. With truth." Bella nodded. The fragile understanding between men shaped by tragedy hung in the air like a delicate thread, something unbreakable yet impossible to label as friendship. She gathered her things slowly, eyes lingering on Dmitri. The man she had met on a plane, the man who had terrified and captivated her, was gone. In his place stood someone real, raw, human, someone who had suffered, but now had a choice. You'll be okay?" she asked quietly. He gave a short nod, almost a shrug. "I'll try. That's all anyone can do." Bella turned, stepping toward the door, the silver charm around her neck resting heavily against her chest. Every step toward freedom felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that had been lost to fear and obligation. The plane ride back to California was quiet. Bella stared out the window at clouds tinged with pink dawn light, letting the rhythm of the engines lull the tension that had gripped her for weeks. She no longer clutched at fear or anticipation, only possibility. Arriving home, she stepped into her apartment with a sense of ownership she had never truly felt. The pristine furniture her father had chosen, the paintings on the walls, even the curated lighting no longer felt like chains. They were simply a backdrop. She had changed the narrative. Her father was waiting, expecting obedience, explanation, perhaps guilt. But Bella no longer belonged to the patterns of her past. She looked him in the eye, her voice steady, calm, unwavering. "I'm 31, she said. "And I'm done following rules I didn't choose. I'm done living in fear of what you think is right for me." Victor's jaw tightened, a reflexive pause of authority. But Bella didn't flinch. The years of control, the unasked questions, the locked drawers, none of it had power over her anymore. "I went to Russia," she continued. "I faced danger. I faced truth. And I survived. Not because I followed instructions. Because I made choices. My choices. And from now on, I will continue to make them. Every one of them." Her father's face softened slightly, though the tension lingered. There was no immediate reconciliation. None was necessary. Bella wasn't seeking his approval anymore. She was claiming her life. She went to her bedroom, opening the drawers herself, touching the belongings she had once hesitated to own. Each item she touched was hers to decide, to keep, to discard, to redefine. She unpacked her memories alongside the silver charm that had accompanied her through fear, love, and revelation. Bella smiled faintly to herself. The world outside remained complex and uncertain, but she had found her center. For the first time, she could breathe without the weight of another's rules pressing down. She had reclaimed her identity, one deliberate choice at a time. Even in silence, she could feel the echoes of Moscow. The snow falling on narrow alleys, the city lights reflecting in icy windows, the warmth of unexpected intimacy, and the heartbreak that had forced growth. She had been terrified, captivated, and challenged, and had emerged whole. The phone on her nightstand buzzed faintly. She picked it up, fingers hovering over the screen, a small smile tugging at her lips. A distant, familiar number flashed, a reminder that the story wasn't entirely over. Some connections remain, waiting for the right time to be acknowledged, cherished, or reshaped. Bella placed the phone down, breathing deeply. She was ready for what came next. 6 months had passed since Moscow. Bella sat at her small kitchen table, sunlight filtering through blinds that drew stripes across her hands. She sipped coffee slowly, savoring the warmth, the quiet, the ordinary rhythm of a life she had carved herself. Her apartment felt hers, messy in places, personal in all of them, alive with decisions she had made and reclaimed. The phone buzzed on the counter. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. Her first instinct was caution, a reflex born of months of fear and uncertainty, but something about it felt different. Tentative, hesitant. She answered. "Bella." The voice was unmistakable, gentle, deliberate, full of the kind of weight that only lived experience could give. "Dmitri." I'm working on being better," he said quietly, almost shyly, as if the weight of his past mistakes still pressed down on him. "On being the man I should have been, not the man the lies made me believe I had to be." Bella's chest tightened in a way that was no longer panic, no longer terror. It was hope, fragile and brilliant, sparking in the empty spaces left by the snowed-over streets of Moscow and the chaos that had once consumed her. "You're allowed to try," she said softly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Everyone deserves that chance." They spoke for a few minutes, carefully, deliberately. Not about the past that had hurt them both, but about the present that they could choose together. Every word carried weight. Every pause held understanding. The line between fear and trust had shifted, melted into something new, possibility. After the call ended, Bella placed the phone down and leaned back in her chair. Her fingers toyed with the silver charm she had carried through it all, the reminder of her mother, of herself, of courage threaded through fear. She thought back to the fortune teller at the county fair, years ago, at 16. "You'll meet a man who will take your breath away." At the time, she had laughed it off. She had never understood the kind of breathlessness that fear could bring. The kind that left her running through icy Moscow alleys, heart pounding, thinking every shadow was the last she would see. But now she understood. Breathless didn't always mean danger. Sometimes it meant learning to breathe again, learning to trust, to hope, to love without letting go of oneself. Sometimes it meant feeling alive in a world that had tried to cage her. She closed her eyes and let the sunlight warm her face. Every scar, every choice, every terrifying moment had led her here. She could remember Moscow, the snow, the city lights, the quiet terror, and the moments of fragile intimacy, and feel it as a story that had shaped her, not defined her. Sometimes healing didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean erasing pain or pretending the shadows had never existed. It meant remembering differently, holding the memories with new hands, seeing them for what they had taught, and letting the future be chosen freely. Bella opened her eyes, the silver charm resting against her chest like a heartbeat she could call her own. Outside, the city moved in its usual rhythm, oblivious to the small victories happening in apartments, kitchens, and hearts everywhere. She took a deep breath, steady, full, deliberate, and smiled. Some stories end not with perfection, but with understanding. Not with the closure of every wound, but with the courage to live despite them. Not with certainty, but with the freedom to choose, again and again and again. And somewhere, across oceans and snow-dusted streets, a man she had once feared, once loved, was trying to do the same. Sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means remembering differently. If this story touched you, tell us where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive and ensures the next one will be just as unforgettable.